In this video, we're going to work on examples 10.7 to 10.9 from your book. If you'd like to follow along, open the Chapter 10 Classwork.xls workbook from My Courses and click on the EX 10.7 Worksheet tab. In our example 10.7, we're going to classify credit approval decisions intuitively. So, the first thing we're going to do is graph credit score versus years of credit history. To do that, I'm going to select the range B3 all the way down to C53, include all the data, then click Insert. In the Charts group, I'm going to select Scatter XY, and then our first one, Scatter. Now, just to get a little better view of our data, I'm going to click on horizontal value axis. So I'm going to hover until I see horizontal value axis, single click, right click, and choose Format Axis. And for the minimum, I'll just type 400. It'll make it easier to see. And just close up the Format Axis box, and now I can see. Now, there are several ways that I can classify this data set, and the book talks about this. One way that I can classify this data set, I'm going to click on the Format tab instead of the Design tab under Chart Tools. So one way that I can do this is I could put a line in. So the book puts a line in at around 640 credit score. So basically, anybody to the right of this line would get a yes, and anybody to the left of this line would get a no. Another way we could classify it is kind of look for groups. So I'm going to delete that line. I'm going to go back to my Format tab and my Insert Shapes, and I'm going to choose a line. Another way that we could do this is put a diagonal line, kind of where we see a break in the group. So I'll color that one black as well. And basically anything to the right of the line gets a yes, and anything to the left of the line is going to get a no. Now, if we have a line here, all we have to do is extend it and see where it hits the x-axis and the y-axis. And once we have our 2 points, we can calculate the slope and the intercept, and then we can use that line to plot. So the book is talking about 2 different ways that we can classify the data. The first way is with a credit score above 640, you get a yes. And another one is the equation that we see on page 316, that years equals negative 0.095 times the credit score plus 74.66. Now let's move on to example 10.8, which I'm actually going to do on the 10.7 tab, because if you notice, the book has actually 2 example 10.8s. So now we're going to do the first example 10.8, but we're going to do it on the 10.7 worksheet tab. So I'm just going to drag this chart out of the way. Now let's say we use the first method that the book had, that you need a credit score of 640, actually above 640 to be approved. If you're 640 and less, you're going to be rejected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in cell G4, and I'm going to type equals if. So if your credit score, so I'm going to click on B4, if B4 is greater than 640, comma, then the value of true is going to be approved. Close that up in quotes, type a comma. Now, if it's false, we're going to reject the loan. So I'll put that in double quotes because it's a label. Reject, close the double quotes, and then close up the if statements. So if B4 is greater than 640, we're going to approve. Otherwise, we're going to reject. So I'm going to hit Enter. I'm going to click back on cell G4, and I'm going to double click the fill handle to bring the predicted down. Now we're going to see how well our prediction works against the actual. Now that we've calculated all of our predicted, we're going to move on, and even though this is our first example 10.8, we're going to prepare the classification matrix on our example 10.7 tab, because if you notice in the book there are actually two example 10.8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in cell J4. Now what I'm going to do, if the two match, approve, I'll count it in this cell. If actual is approved but predicted is reject, I'll count it in this cell. If actual is reject and predicted is approved, I'll count it in this cell. And finally, if both are reject, I'll count it in this cell. In order to do this, I'm going to use COUNTIFs. So I'm going to click in cell J4 and type equals count ifs and open the parentheses. So my first criteria range is going to be the actual. So I'm going to select the range F4 all the way down to F53, and I'm going to make sure to use my F4 key to lock down that range, to make sure it says $F $4 to $F53, because as I copy it around the matrix, I want to make sure it always copies the actual range. Now I'm going to type a comma, and you're going to notice that our actuals are always in column I. So we have our actuals in I4 and I5. We want to make sure that we always reference the actuals even when we copy it out to column A. So I'm going to click on cell I4, but I'm going to lock down the column. So I'm going to hit my F4 key or just type my $ until that says $I4. So for the approved, we're going to lock column I, but allow the row to change. Now I'm going to type a comma, and I'm going to do my criteria range 2. So I'm going to select the range G4 down to G53. And once again, I'm going to lock that range down. So I'm going to use my F4 to turn those into absolute cell references. Type my comma. And now my criteria 2 is going to be whether it's predicted. So I'm going to click on cell J3, but notice my predicted is always in row 3. The column changes from J to K, but my predicted is always in row 3. So I'm going to use my F4 or type the $ until that says J$3. Now I'm going to close up my COUNTIFs, close up my parentheses, hit enter, and I can either copy it out and then down, or down and then out. I'm going to copy it out and then down, and we now have our classification matrix. Now we're going to move on to our second example 10.8, where we're going to partition data sets using the XLMiner. So I'm going to click on the EX 10.8 worksheet tab, and I'm going to click anywhere within the list. Now why we're going to partition these, we're going to partition them into what are called training and validation sets. Because what happens is if you build a model using data, and then you test that model using the same data, of course the model is going to fit because we used that data to build the model. So especially if you have a large amount of data, you partition the sets. So your training set is used to build the model, and then your validation set is used with different data to see actually if your model fits. So in order to partition our data sets in XLMiner, I'm going to make sure that I'm on the EX 10.8 worksheet tab. I'm going to click any cell within the list, and I'm going to click the data mining tab. Now remember, you only have the Analytic Solver and the data mining tab if you purchase the Analytic Solver software, and I have instructions on my courses how to purchase the Analytic Solver add-in. So in the XLMiner group, I'm going to go into the data mining group, and I'm going to click partition, and then I'm going to choose standard partition. Okay, so this time we're going to send all of our variables over to the selected variables. So I'm going to click homeowner, hold down my shift key, and then click decision. And notice it selected all of the variables. I'm going to move that over to the right, and again notice my data range is correct, and it tells me how many rows and columns that I have. We want to make sure that it picks up the rows randomly, and we're going to set our seed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to select the default for automatic percentages. So our training set is going to be 60% and our validation set is going to be 40% of the data. We could specify percentages or do equal percentages. I'm going to click OK. And we've got down here, and now when I click partition data, we can see all of our records and basically what partition it belongs to. Now we're going to move on to example 10.9. So I'm going to click the EX 10.9 worksheet tab, and in this example what we're going to do is we're going to score additional data. So in example 10.7 we used our data and we came up with two different ways to categorize the data. One was a credit score above 640 and another one was a regression equation with our line. So in this time what we're going to do is we're going to use that regression equation for the line. So you can see in example 10.9 they're using if years plus 0.095 multiplied by the credit score is less than or equal to 74.66, then the decision is reject. If that amount is over 74.66, then it's approved. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll over to my additional data, and I'm going to click in cell M4 for the decision. So I'm going to type equals IF and open the parentheses. So once again, if my years of credit history plus 0.095 multiplied by the credit score, so J4 plus 0.095 multiplied by I4, if that number is in fact less than or equal to 74.66, comma, the decision is going to be to reject, and our reject decision coded is a 0. So I'm going to type the number 0. If it is in fact false, we're going to accept, and in this coded database our accept is the number 1. So if it's false, we'll just have it put in the number 1. I'm going to close up my parentheses and hit enter, and we should have the same decision. It's what's in example 10.9. The only one that should be accepted is the final one. So I'm going to click on cell M4, double click that fill handle, and we can see that using the equation that we developed in example 10.7, when we have new data, we can use that equation to decide whether we want to accept or reject the loan.